For many years I grew up with horror stories, but none could compare to my real-life fears. This story recounts an unforgettable night drive. On that fateful night, rain was pouring, and the wind was howling as the only road stretched through the forest. The headlights of my car reflected the raindrops' light as I struggled to move forward in the darkness. Due to unforeseen circumstances, this journey was unplanned, but my family required me to get home immediately. Deeper into the forest I ventured, and the silence around me was chilling. Suddenly, an old, abandoned gas station appeared on the side of the road. However, it seemed as if this station hadn't been in use for years. Its windows were broken, and its sign was rusty. Even this sight sent shivers down my spine. But I had an emergency to attend to, so I continued without stopping at the station. As the hours of my journey passed, the rain intensified, and visibility rapidly decreased. Suddenly, the car's headlights illuminated a silhouette in the forest. A child was walking along the road in a rainy cloak. There shouldn't have been a child walking here at this hour, so I immediately stopped the car and rolled down the window. A panicked voice of an elderly man called out to the child, "Do you need help?" The child turned to look at me, their eyes black and resembling deep voids. Suddenly I began to tremble with fear. The child silently nodded and pointed into the depths of the forest. I slowly reversed the car and began to follow the child. As I ventured deeper into the forest, the sound of the rain grew louder, and the darkness became even more intense. Suddenly, the child vanished, and I panicked. Looking around, my eyes spotted another silhouette approaching through the trees. This time it was an elderly woman in a dirty white dress. Staring at me, the woman approached silently and tapped on my car's window. I cautiously rolled it down, and she came closer. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her lips trembled as she spoke in a faint voice, "Please help." But my instincts warned me, and I suddenly realized that the woman was a true ghost. I quickly shifted the car into reverse and sped away, leaving her screaming as she fled into the forest. After a long while, I finally emerged from the forest, reaching a safe place. Everything that had transpired that night blurred the line between dream and reality. Despite my journey being motivated by an emergency, it had become a horror story etched in my mind. This story still sends shivers down my spine, even when recalling the memory of that dreadful night. I will never know what truly happened that night, but that drive will forever remain among the most terrifying memories of the real world. Years ago, our town's quiet and dark streets provided the perfect backdrop for telling ghost stories. This story recounts one of the scariest events in our town and blurs the line between reality and fiction. At night, an impressive silence blanketed the surroundings of our town. The coldness of the night had driven the town's residents to lock themselves indoors. A group of brave friends, like myself, decided to seek some excitement in this silence. One evening, on a dark winter night, we gathered and ventured outside of town. Our journey led us deep into an old and dark forest. We walked in the faint light of the moon, listening to the rustling of the grass and the soft whisper of the wind. We followed paths leading in different directions, relishing the opportunity to tell stories in the dark until we realized that something was amiss. After progressing further into the forest, we suddenly encountered an eerie silence. It was so dense that we could hear our own breaths. One of my friends abruptly stopped and in a trembling voice said, "Do you hear those sounds?" We widened our eyes and began to listen, and indeed we were hearing strange sounds. They seemed like distant whispers, but their meaning was indecipherable. We continued with quickened steps, and the sounds were getting closer. Then, as I looked towards the moonlight, I couldn't believe my eyes. Bizarre figures were appearing and disappearing in the forest. One moment they were there, the next they vanished. These figures seemed faint and translucent, yet eerily horrifying in a familiar way. In a panic, we wanted to turn back, but it seemed like the paths had vanished. We had forgotten which way we had come, and we were lost in the depths of the forest. The sounds were now very close, and the figures were becoming more distinct. Among them there were elderly people, children, and even some that resembled animals. Finally, we found an opening and managed to escape the forest. When we returned to the town, no one wanted to believe what we had experienced, but that night we had confronted the terrifying truths of the forest, and we never visited that place again. The night drive had blurred the line between reality and fiction, becoming a tale that circulated through our town. This story remains chilling, even when recalling the memory of that horrifying night. Who knows? Perhaps we will never learn what truly happened in that forest, but this memory will always live within us. As I drove along the road outside of town, the sky rapidly darkened. Raindrops pelted the windshield, making the road ahead increasingly difficult to see. The radio was silent, and there were no other vehicles on the road. I was alone. Suddenly, I saw a silhouette emerging in front of me. It approached slowly and became somewhat clearer. Was it a beggar or a lost traveler? I slowed down and rolled down the window, but at that moment it began to look at me with hollow, vacant eyes. Its eyes were like Swiss cheese, and it started humming a strange tune. Goosebumps covered my skin. I quickly closed the window and accelerated, but the silhouette started following me. It kept humming its eerie song. I could feel its voice getting closer. Finally, I entered the town, and the song slowly faded away. However, that horrifying night drive left a lasting impact on me. Whenever I recall that moment, the face of that strange silhouette and the haunting song continue to haunt my mind. Perhaps what I encountered that night was a presence not of this real world, but its effect still lingers.